computer. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Authorsphere. I'm your host, Dan Alatorre, and joining me today, TikTok sensation, Jenn the Moody Reader. Jenn, welcome aboard.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So I love watching your videos on TikTok. You're an avid reader, but for those who don't know, how did you get into the TikTok thing? And you know, you're over 10,000 followers now. So how long did it take for that to happen?
Yeah, well, I started back in 2020 when my daughter was on it. So I kind of went on just to make sure to check on her and watch her. And then after that point, I used to be a teacher. And so I went on kind of like a way to escape what I was going through with teaching. And then eventually in April of 2021-ish, I got onto Book Talk. And so from that point, I really took off. But before you watch any of my earlier videos, it's just videos with my daughters and silly like skits and stuff like that. But yeah.
I always do that. Whenever I'm following somebody, then, then if you follow them, then their stuff pops up in your feed more on TikTok specifically. And so then after a while, if I'm curious, I'll go through and say, when did they start? What did they start talking about? And it's different for everybody. But then it kind of evolves into the thing that people go to you to see you do, so to speak, which I think in your case, would you say it's mostly book reviews or something else?
Mostly book reviews. I do some short videos on true crime. So I have some of my followers are there for that as well.
And we got a lot of followers, and you have a couple of different book clubs. Did you start those as well?
I did not. No, I only joined them. I'm not organized enough to do any of that kind of stuff, but yeah.
So what do you think? So first of all, let me ask you. So you're a pretty avid reader, it would seem. And I think the appeal of your TikTok videos are when you're talking about a book, you're being honest about it. You're just being you, which for me, that's the biggest thing. It's like, it's good if it's entertaining, and you are. And but it's better if somebody's being just like not pretentious, just saying who they are. They're not saying this is good because everybody else has said it's good. It's just this is what you think. And I find that kind of thing really beneficial, let's say, because there's going to be books that you recommend that I like and books that you recommend that I don't. And then I'll start to get a feel for, she really, I identify or I connect with the books like this that she recommends. And then I've got a good path for book recommendations. And that obviously works. Or you wouldn't have so many followers. How you come up with the books that you're going to read? You just read everything?
I at least tried all different kinds of genres. If I don't like it, I usually will stop reading it within the first couple of chapters. And then I won't talk about those kind of books.
Yeah,
so, and usually I won't bring it up on here unless it's like a 4 or 5 star read for me. Unless somebody like asks me to do a review on it, like one of my friends on here, then I'll do a review on it and I'll be as honest as I can without, trashing the book or anything like that. Because I know it's usually just my opinion on the books, but I always make it very clear that it's my opinion, but you should go read it for yourself. But yeah, there's certain genres I don't really like, but I can't say that I won't read any books from those genres. So it's
always tricky because if somebody comes in, if I go to a site and they're only talking about the 5-star books that they like, then you start to wonder, did they really like all these books? And then you're wondering, well, what didn't they like? You kind of want to know that too, but then it's the content creator, right? To say, I really didn't like this book, and now I'm telling the world how bad it is. Not necessarily a bad book, it's just wasn't for me,
Right.
And there's, but as the author, I can tell you, nobody likes a review where they're like, this was only a 3-star, or I didn't like this at all.
Yeah, and I think it's all in the way you like present the review, because you can say you don't like a book for certain reasons, and you can still be kind about it. But there's certain people that will do it in like a very negative way, and that's what I try to stay away from.
Oh, there's people out there who trash stuff, and I did a review of a couple of books where they just weren't for me, but I had done no research on them. I was just like, what are people recommending on TikTok? I'll grab those. If I had even read the back cover of the book description, they're not books I would have picked up. They were like, one was like one of the reviews said it was similar to like an 80s slasher movie. I'm like, okay, I probably wouldn't have picked that up to read. Now, if I knew that's what it was, then you get on that ride knowing that's what that ride's going to do. And I went into it intentionally the other way, because I tend to learn about the book before I read it, and I find out too many spoilers, and then I don't enjoy the book for that reason. So, I'm
Yeah.
more research oriented, and I shouldn't be. So I went the other way and said, all right, won't read them at all, won't research them at all. And then got 3 books that were very similar. I think I was looking for horror stories over the summer, and picked a couple that just weren't for me. But so how many books, let's say over the course of a month, do you think you read?
It depends on the month. Like this month, I might make it through 3. But like last month, I think it was 8. So it just depends on how I'm doing.
So that's 2 a week. And do you mostly stick with physical copies or ebooks or audiobooks?
I do mainly audiobooks. I have a hard time, staying focused on physical books. So they take me a longer time to get through.
That's just the opposite for me. I have a hard time. Maybe you can tell me your secret. Maybe earphones is the secret. When I'm doing an audiobook, so let me turn around. If I'm reading a physical book and my mind wanders a little bit because maybe they talked about a red car and I'm thinking, oh yeah, red car, blah, blah, blah. And then I got to bring myself back. I can just go right back up the page and say red car. I was only gone for a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds, but it's really easy for me to jump back and find my place. In an audiobook, for whatever reason, for me, my mind wanders more and it's much harder for me to find my place. But with podcasts, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't kind of have that same problem. Like it's easy to jump back 15 seconds at a time on a podcast on my phone.
Mhm.
So maybe I'm doing myself a disservice there with the audiobooks.
Well, and I think it's all like when you read a book and you like visualize it in your head, you like visualize the story in your head. And like for me, I can't. Like I have a concept of like what's going on, but like I don't see it playing out as a movie in my head. And so for me, if I'm listening to an audio, it's more like a movie to me, even though I can't see what's going on. Like I just can't in my mind. So
it probably has something to do with the pace. Now, do you have certain narrators? Like my wife, she listens to books she likes certain genres, but she loves certain narrators. And so like one, I believe, I may have this wrong, one narrator did like all the John Grisham books or a lot of them. So she likes that narrator. So she goes and she says, I'll listen to anything that narrator does. Are you like that? You have favorite narrators that you follow or that you listen to their stuff?
I have one. She did all the Ruth Ware books. I really like her. Her name is Imogen. I can't remember her last name.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's one of my favorites.
What is it about the way she does it that makes her different from everybody else?
Honestly, I think it's just her voice. It's just the way she
tone and caliber and stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I certainly know, like I audition narrators for my audiobooks, right? So there's a couple different ways to do it. Typically you go in and you post and then people will say, can I audition for this? If you're doing it open, if I've already worked with you in the past, like right now I use Sky Stafford for pretty much everything. I just like the way she emphasizes the words the way I emphasize them in my head when I write it. So she's, as far as connecting with the way I intended them to be delivered. But there are plenty of people who love the way she narrates and plenty of people who don't.
Right.
And so that's like personal preference. But I've listened to auditions where it's like, oh, it's like nails on a chalkboard. Like, and I try to be nice and say, well, listen, you had a good feel for the material, but your timbre, your caliber of voice, male or female, is not right to my ear. And since I have to listen to 12 hours of it or whatever, and we're going to pass. And then a lot of times I try to give instructions like, for what it's worth. It's like, for me, if you had done this, that might be better. And if you want to try again, by all means, try again. But there are other people who you just listen to, and like after 5 seconds, you're like, oh, I think this person gets it.
Right.
And then you listen and you're like, I could listen to this person all day. They're just like how Morgan Freeman is just a very engaging, a very good delivery of stuff. But you wouldn't maybe want him doing your cookbook, let's say.
Right.
Or maybe not your love story or whatever. So there's different ways of delivery, I think. So most of the books you do over the course of a month, most of those are audiobooks?
Yeah, like 99% of them are audiobooks. Yeah.
That's awesome. So do you have a favorite audiobook service you use?
I use Libby, the library, and then I also use Script. And then there's Libro FM, and I'm in their like ALC group, so I'll listen to their ALCs at the beginning of the month if I want to. I don't have to, but yeah.
Well, that's a bunch. Do you use Audible or anybody like that?
I don't use Audible. I use Script, so it's similar, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I know most people use Audible, but well, I don't explore the audio book stuff as much as I should. So that may be some pointers for me. Maybe I should get my books out on some other services as well. So what's your favorite genre to read?
Can I give like my top 4 or 5?
There's only like 17 genres. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your,
I like nonfiction. I like horror, mystery, thriller, and then like I like some romance. So
yeah, I would say I'm kind of eclectic when it comes to what I like, a movie that I'll pick or a book that I'll pick or stuff like that. But like when I listen to a podcast, I mostly listen to comedians because I'm
okay.
focusing on my work and I'm usually exercising or something. So there's enough pain and drama in the exercise. I don't need more
Right.
from the podcast. So I usually listen to comedians. But as far as entertainment wise, yeah, I probably stick mostly to suspense, mystery, thrillers, that kind of stuff. Now, out of those ones you gave us, how would you rank them? Is it just, well, Jenn, the moody reader, does it depend on what mood you're
Depends
in?
on my mood. Yeah, it really depends on my mood. But probably mystery thriller would be my top, and then nonfiction, I would
Now,
say.
nonfiction is broad. What kind of nonfiction stuff?
Usually like true crime, anything like morbid related. Like I like to read books on like death. I don't know how else to say it, but like I don't enjoy like self-help books, things like that mainly.
Yeah, that's a different niche for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew a self-help lady. She was all about health and fitness. This is when I was first starting to promote. And I don't know how I found her. And she was like, well, I promote like this, do these different things. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's how you market a mystery thriller, but
Yeah.
So hey, she was very successful at what she did. And some
Right.
of the stuff that she did, I tried. Some of it worked, a lot of it didn't, because it's just a different person looking for that kind of book than looking for my kind of book. So the stuff about true crime. Now, do you listen to any of the like true crime podcasts or any of that kind of stuff?
Yep. I only listen to true crime podcasts. So, and I have like certain ones I listen to like every day. And most of the ones I listen to were very,
Every day.
yeah, every day. I work from home, so
Mhm.
I can listen while I'm working. And most of the ones I listen to are very like conversational. It's like conversations between friends. And I know it's hard, like not everybody enjoys it, but they bring humor to it. And so that's what I
No,
enjoy.
it's true. There are things you can joke about and things you
Right.
can't. But if you, let's just say there's a bunch of rooms in a building. When you go into the room that is true crime, we all know we're in that room. You walk in there, that's what it is. In there, there's going to be times to be horrified by stuff, to make light of stuff. And it's all when you get a feel for the room, right? Like if I don't know you very well, I probably can't tease you, or I might not be able to make a joke because we don't know each other very well. But if we're brother and sister and grew up together, yeah, you can tease the heck out of that person and make all kinds of jokes because you know them and you know what they'll take offense to, what they won't, right? You got that comfort level. So what are some of the true crime, the really good ones? Well, you listen every day. So which one would you say you listen to the most?
I listen to Generation Y. I listen to Morbid, Let's Go to Court, Obsessed with Disappeared, and True Crime Obsessed, and Sinisterhood. Those are my top.
So when you go through over the course of a week, because they don't post every day, do they? Not all of them.
They don't. So I listen to certain ones on certain days.
Yeah, it's like once a week, I think they post most of those.
Yeah. I think Morbid posts a couple of times a week. But yeah, most are just once a week.
Well, Morbid, they've really taken off. I don't know what they were like a year ago or whatever, but they were growing like wildfire, probably still are.
Yeah.
And that's why, yeah, I know a lot of people who listen to that one. Why do you think? And it's mostly women, and it's mostly, I would say, if you took a target, the bullseye would be like probably age 35, and then you go outward from there. It's like 25 to 45, or probably older than that, even maybe 55. But that's the big part of the bell-shaped curve. Why do you think it is? I'm not asking you how old you are. Why do you think it is that women in particular, because I think the vast majority of those listeners are women, and the vast majority of readers of of mystery thrillers or murder mysteries, all women. Why do you think that is?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I like read my first true crime book when I was like 12 or 13. So for me, it's always just been a part of my life, and my mom was really interested in it too. So that might be
It's
a
not
part of
just
it.
you. I mean, that is,
Yeah, I don't.
if you take 10 women who are 35 years old who are readers, maybe half of them are into the murder mysteries, the true crime, and especially podcasts now. Because if you're driving to work, you can listen to the podcast. If you're doing filing or something, you can be listening to the podcast. If you're exercising like me, you can be listening to those true crime podcasts. So there's something about it that really just grabs the attention.
Yeah, and I don't really know like what it is. And like for me, for like the mysteries, I prefer to like read ones where there's like a female lead or a woman lead in it, to see that she can make it through the book, and it feels like more empowering, I think, for me.
Well, female lead like the detective trying to solve the crime, or female
like the
lead like
even if it's like the detective trying to solve it, or the person who is like the serial killer is going after and she gets through the book. Either way, it's just, I don't know, feels.
well, I think that's the most common. That if you have for whatever reason, like these books here, they all have a woman on the front of the cover because it's like that the woman in distress thing, potential victim, is she going to survive it? I suppose, you know, ounce for ounce, maybe the woman is a more sympathetic character, more vulnerable character than a guy would be in the same circumstance, theoretically. There's certainly some appeal there because different book covers don't sell as well. And so you look at what the genre tends to do, and you just, you want to, like I always say, if you're trying to sell milk, you want it to be sold in a milk carton, something that they look at and say that's a milk carton instead of like an oil can. It makes it a little easier. So I just follow the herd on that, but I didn't used to. I had more dramatic looking stuff, more featuring the killer or whatever. They didn't appeal as well as when they had the potential victim on.
Right.
So so your favorite podcast was which one?
I would say like the top out of all those is probably like Let's Go to Court. Yeah, and they go over, it's like it's two friends and they go over two different like court cases. And they're very funny, and it's like my comfort podcast. I can listen to them all day. So.
Well, how long do they go when they do their podcast? I haven't listened to that one.
Their first ones were like an hour or so, but some of them now are like 2 hours. Yeah.
So I told you I mostly listen to comedians. So I had one comedian I was listening to, and then he had some friends on, other comedians usually. He'll talk about all kinds of stuff. He'll bring in a physicist. Sometimes that's interesting, sometimes not. The ones I like when he has other comedians. And then he had this other comedian on. I thought, well, that guy's pretty funny, and that guy had a podcast. So I started listening to that guy's podcast. And then he used to be on TV or something, like on Travel Channel or something. So he had 2 or 3. He did like one on Thursday for an hour, then a different one, and a different one. So he does like 3. He doesn't do them every week, but it's basically 3 a week. Well, this one, he had on, I forget what the deal was. He had on these 2 other guys. They do, it was either movie reviews or something like that. Something along those lines. I'm really not portraying it properly, but those 3 guys talked for, that podcast probably went 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours. All right. And they're comedians. So they're talking about work, but they're joking around a lot, and they're talking about everything, fishing or whatever. I couldn't care less about fishing, but if you got a couple of funny people talking about fishing, it's probably gonna be funny. So I found that when I go work out, I'm mostly, jogging up and down my road here outside my house. That's where I'm pointing to, my road outside my house. It's right there. So I just listened to it like the 1 hour when I was working out, right? Then I turned it off, went about my stuff, had to go pick up my daughter from school, got another 15 minutes there, another 15 minutes coming home, had to run a couple errands, got like another 20, 30 minutes there. So over the course of a week, not even a week, I got through 3.5 hours, however long that thing was. I probably started it on Monday. I was done with it by Wednesday. I'm sitting there thinking, how in the heck if somebody had asked me, did you listen to a 3.5 hour podcast? I would say, I don't know. I don't have that kind of time to sit around and listen to a 3.5 hour podcast. but I did. And that wasn't the only one I listened to this past week, right? I listened to one that's news oriented and some other ones. So you're able to listen to books where you have to pay attention to them at home. Average audiobook is what, 10, 12 hours, something like that?
Yeah, 10, 12 hours. I usually listen to them at like 2 times speed.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah.
Did it take a little getting used to?
No, listening to like, 1 time speed, my brain just can't process it that slow. So,
Oh, I see.
but it depends on the narrator. There's some books I've read where I can't listen to it that quickly. So,
Well, you're right. When I do the auditions for them, I usually tell people my stuff's supposed to be fast paced. So you can't read it slow. You got to kind of bring that energy. And it took Sky one or two, I won't say auditions, but she would record a sample chapter and stuff. And then they do she would do like a little chunk where she was saying, it was really cool. They'd be like, you got all these different characters. And so she would give this one a Southern accent, this one a New York accent, so that you can tell them apart easily. And then she'd send me a sample and say, this is how I'm going to voice these characters. What do you think? And I was like, well, that's great for me. I get to pick and choose, make this one up. And I always love, she'll think of stuff I didn't think of. Me, they've all got different voices in my head, but I'm not narrating it for somebody who now needs to hear it all audibly, right? So she would do that. But anyway, I remember when we first started working together, I was like, yeah, you gotta bring a quick pace. I don't want you to read overly fast. All the emotional, dramatic elements need to be there, but a fast pace. And maybe like you're saying, if you go at whatever normal speed is, maybe if you were to take that up 25% or 50% with certain narrators, it would have that fast pace. And there are books that are that way. There are movies that are that way. Some people the stuff just reads faster, and some narrators are intentionally slower, trying to evoke an emotion or mood to the scene. So when you go through that many books, are there favorites? Whoops, did I lose you?
oh, sorry, are you there? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Sorry about that.
You popped out for a second. So when you go through, let's just say, eight audiobooks, and they're mostly going to be audiobooks, right? So that's a lot of time commitment to learning all these different characters. Do you ever see, for me, I would think I'd start running them together. I'd start thinking this guy was from that story or something. I guess you obviously keep them pretty clear. But do you have, out of that, do you have like ones that just really stick with you and stay with you for the year or for maybe the rest of your life or anything like that?
After I read a book, I usually forget a lot of what I read. It's just me. It's just my memory. I don't, I can't keep things in there for very long. But there are certain books that I don't necessarily remember like what happened in the book, but I can remember how the book made me feel. And so, yeah, there's one book I read last month and the month before, like how not to drown in a glass of water, and that one has fantastic narration. It's a really short read, and it was just a really good book. And so that's something that's going to stick with me for a while. But there's some books where I liked it and I know it made me feel good or it made me scared or whatever, and I'll rate it good, but I won't necessarily remember every single aspect of the book.
So that's interesting. See, I always like to talk to people I consider avid readers, right? And audiobook, that's the same thing, to where it's like, what was it about certain books that stuck out with you? And I think you actually nailed it on the head, where it's like the way the book made you feel. So somebody told me, some author had said, not me, said in an interview that they didn't say it to me. They said it in an interview that I watched on YouTube or something, where it's like, we kind of know maybe the beginning, middle, end of a generic story.
Right.
It's really the ride. The reader is coming along for the ride, even if they knew, pick a famous reveal at the end of a story, even if you told them the big surprise ending, it's going on the ride that is the fun. And I was like, it's like a roller coaster. You stand in line on a roller coaster, you see where it goes, you see what it does. The only reason you're getting on the roller coaster is the people who just got done riding it got off. So you're going to be safe, but it's the ride. So I think for a reader, it's that, and that would be encapsulated to be like, the way it makes me feel, the feeling that sticks with you. So on that particular book, it was a true crime one, right?
No, it wasn't.
Mhm.
It was, I don't know, like contemporary fiction. I don't know how you would.
So would you
I
say
just
it
think
was more, go ahead.
I think like I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I read the actual book, but the narration, it felt like the lady in the book was just having a conversation with me. Um, yeah,
So that's a skill, to connect like that. It's a good narrative. So have you listened to other things that narrator has done?
I have not yet. No, so I'll have to look into more to see
Yeah,
how.
that would be my wife's thing. It's like, wow, that was a really good book. And I'm like, who's the author? She goes, well, I don't know who the author was, but this narrator was great. I've got to see what else the narrator has done.
Yeah,
Speaking
and I always make sure to in my like review videos. Most of my review videos are about audiobooks, and I always make sure to like I try my best to include the narrators in those reviews too. And I don't think everybody does that, but I think they deserve a shout out as well. So.
they do. I think people who really, it depends on who's tuning into your your video. If it's somebody like me who tends not to do audiobooks, it'll be an interesting mention that it's not going to be critical. I'll be thinking about the
Right.
author. But people who like audiobooks are probably maybe 50-50, maybe more that who that narrator is. Again, just my sister, two of my sisters love audiobooks. Two of them, I only have two. My wife. So when I talk to audiobook listeners, it's very, very weighted towards, yeah, good author, we'll establish that, but it's important to know. They always feel it's important to say the narrator does such a good job, and they have ones they like, and they become fans of the narrator and follow that person around, under the next story and whatnot. So, you said you got onto TikTok how long ago?
It would have been in maybe the summer of it was the summer of 2020.
Well, recently you were in what, I never go through this, but you said you were in a reading slump, and
Yes.
got a lot of sympathy, a lot of people making suggestions on how to break out of your reading slump. So for those who don't know, what's a reading slump and how do you break out of it?
Well, it's like when you try to like read a book, but like nothing is really keeping your interest, and so you can't really just get through anything, and you're just not in the mood for anything, and I think for me, like maybe because I've been reading a lot of horror and thrillers lately, and for me to get out of my slump, I started to read like this romance book, and it's reading something different kind of helped me get out of that slump.
How long did the
Yeah, and
slump
I think
last?
because I said before, like a lot of months I read like 8 books, and so like I read this one book and I really enjoyed it, but it took me like 3 weeks to get through this 200-page book,
Wow.
which isn't normal for me. So
It'd be like, 2 days, 3 days normally.
yeah, exactly. So, and I couldn't like usually I read a couple books at a time, and I couldn't like get into any other books at that same time. It's just so I got through that book in like I don't know, the 2 or 3 weeks. And
So
then after that, there was
interspersed
like
into 2 or 3 weeks, you were reading other things as well.
I was trying to. I was like
Oh,
starting other books, but I would read like maybe 5 pages and be like, put it away. And then I wouldn't come back to it. So there's a lot of books that I've started that I need to get back to eventually when I'm in the mood for them, I guess. But yeah,
well,
I mean, I know some people's slumps like last for like months, and so for me, like maybe it lasted like a month or so. That's a long time for me. So
a month is a long time for anybody. Like writers
yeah,
go through slumps, and they call it more like writer's block. So it's like, nothing, I'm not getting any ideas kind of deal. But with a reader slump, it's a little different. It's like me when I go to the refrigerator, I'm hungry, kind of hungry. I'm looking in the refrigerator, just nothing looks good. The day before, I probably would have eaten anything in there, and the day after, I might eat anything in there. But that particular day and time, nothing looks good. It's like, I don't want to go to McDonald's. I don't want to go to Publix and get groceries and cook something. It's just that thing. So you start a bunch of books and just nothing's appealing to you. So how do you break the slump? You just keep trying different things.
I just tried different things until finally something clicks.
Now, the way you portrayed it was like, this is a big deal, like I'm in a slump, I'm in a reading slump, help me kind of thing. And
Yeah,
other people who are, again, avid readers are like, I'm in such a reading slump. It's like, there's 200 books in your to
I
be read
know.
pile, just start going through them. One of them's going to click, but I guess that's easier said than done.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for sure.
of all the things you try, 5-page and set aside, how many of those, or will you go back to any of those and actually read them?
Yep, there's one in particular that I found the audiobook of because I had a physical book. So I found the audiobook. So I'll go back to that one for sure. And I talked about that one a little bit, I think at the beginning of this week. I just haven't gone back to it yet. So I'll get back to that one. There's a couple that I'll probably get back to, but I won't be in like any rush to get back to them.
I guess not. Well, so I had a book, popular author, relatively popular book, although it's always hard to really assess that. And I picked up that book. So a friend recommended it, right? And this friend knew me well enough to know I should have liked that book, or that's why they recommended it. I started that book, I can't tell you how many times. And I get 2 or 3 pages in, I don't care. I'm not interested. I've heard great things and it's getting a gazillion reviews, but for all I know, that author always gets a gazillion reviews because it's kind of automatic at this point. And I never did read it. I still have the book around here somewhere. And to me, it's like, it's unreadable. If I can't, now I'm a lazy reader. So you gotta get my attention pretty early on. And I suppose that's from when we had to read stuff like whatever, Beowulf or whatever, when we were in 7th or 8th grade, where it's like, or, things that you had to read that didn't necessarily grab your attention right away or at all, versus things that I read that just grabbed me right away. A lot of my daughter's books, she's 12, so actually I got a couple of notebooks over here. She would get reading assignments and she would be like books they had to read, right? And she was like, I got to read this book. And it's like 120-page book. And she's acting like it's War and Peace or something. So I'd always get a copy, all right? So she's got her paperback copy. I get mine and I start reading. I'm like, it's a good book. And so I sit down like, let's read this book. And one of her friends was over who also had the same assignment. I was like, we'll all take turns either reading a page or reading a paragraph or whatever. I'll start. And so it was the K, which is the CAYK, right? It's about World War II, this kid in one of the Caribbean islands or wherever they were. And it talks about how a submarine came into their port that night, a German submarine, right? And I'm like, holy crap. Now, maybe it's because I know World War II and how big of a deal that was. Maybe these kids don't. They're 11 or 12 at the time. 11, I guess. Yeah. So just the fact that I was enthusiastic about reading that first chapter, then they kind of got the suspense of it. To me, it started pretty quick and it got my attention right away because I started into it with really bad expectations. So the surprise of it was, this is interesting. And then this kid, I forget why, he goes on some boat and it sinks and he's stuck on this little island, which is a K. And I can't remember, I don't think there's any fresh water. Him and this other guy. And the older guy, and they have to work together. And then there's a hurricane and the older guy dies. And the kid went blind. The boat exploded. I guess it got torpedoed. He went blind. So now he's blind on this island by himself. And I think the language arts teachers pick books about kids the age of the students. So, it should have appealed because it's like, what if you're in this situation kind of thing. It turned out to be a really good book. Where the Red Fern Grows, they didn't want to read that one. Same deal. By the time they were done with it, they're crying. They're like, I love this book so much. This is my favorite book. I'm like, and you didn't want to read it, So I'm lazy, where a good book usually gets me on board and keeps me. But it's like those first couple of pages, I'm impatient. I'm lazy. It's like I kind of need that, or, well, let's face it, reading for most people, probably for you, it's leisure activity, not a school assignment. I don't have to do it. So when I write, I try to say, they don't have to read this book. They're not getting a grade for reading it. Actually, I'll get a grade if they read it. So I gotta get them interested quickly, get them to like these characters before I start killing them off or whatever, and go like that. What do you feel about the audiobooks that you like? What might they have in common? It doesn't matter genre-wise, but like what would they have in common that get you and keep you that the slump books didn't have, or was it just timing on the slump books?
I think it's just timing. Because I listen to a variety of different books, and some are slower paced, but I do prefer them to be a quicker pace. So if nothing's really happening in the first couple of chapters.
Well, if they're not a good pace, you just click it up to 2x, and then all of a sudden it's
well, even like, I know that's like a quicker pace, but I mean, like the story is like a slow burn story. Like nothing happens until like 50% of until you're like 50% done. And even though it's like a quicker pace, it's not like I don't know how to explain it. Like I read this one book where
there's a faster speed of listening, and then there's a fast paced story where things happen quickly. Yeah, so I get you.
Yeah.
Pace is not enhanced by increasing the speed.
No, not at all.
So let's just say over the last 5 books that you read and enjoyed, what would you say was the common element that got you to really dive in deep with them? Well, let's just go through. You did a TikTok.
I know. I'm thinking of the video I just made about those 3 books.
We'll talk about the 3, and then maybe
like one of them was The Weight of Blood. That's by Tiffany D. Jackson, and she's one of my favorite authors. Horror, and it was pretty much like a modern day retelling of Carrie, but it had like racial overturn, like it had stuff to do with race in it, stuff to do with like I can't think of it. Police brutality is part of it as well, and she does like social horror, and so it's like horror that you can. There's elements of that book that probably wouldn't happen in real life, but there's elements of it that could happen in real life, and that makes it scarier. And her endings are always very ambiguous, and I think for some books that works, and some books it doesn't. And so I enjoyed that about her books, and her books always just make me think, and they make me feel so many different things. So scared, and I was crying during that book too. So that's why I like that book. Yeah. And then like How Not to Drown in a Glass of Water. I already talked about that one already, and it's just the narration was so good. I felt like I was having a conversation with the narrator during the book. It's very different from what I'm usually listened to. And that book also had like different like background noise elements that I usually don't like, but it had like, because most of the book took place in an office, so it had like the typewriter sounds and like drinking water sounds and people talking in the background type sounds, and usually that takes me out of the book, but for this one it really worked. And then Girl Forgotten, I think was the last one I talked about, and that one was a really fast-paced book by Karen Slaughter, and so it had so many twists and turns that kept me guessing during it. And I watched one of your podcasts where you said, I think you said that a lot of people say they can predict what's going to happen in the book, but you don't really think that they can predict what was going on in the book. And that one I couldn't. But after I read that one, I read a book that I did not like. And I thought, like, I kept on like trying to predict what's going on. And I'm like, am I really predicting what's going on? Or am I just like guessing and thinking I'm getting it right? So you were kind of in my head for that book. But yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
Well, I think I may have mentioned in one of my podcasts that I didn't intentionally do it, but when I sent out the book to my beta readers, I created a special version of the book where there was a couple of questions at the end of each chapter, right? And my goal was, like, I'm going to ask you, how's the pace? Is anything you wanted to skip in this chapter? Like, who do you think the bad guy is? 3 or 4, maybe 5, I can't remember. They were, to me, they were short questions, things you can answer quickly. And the idea was, if I ask the same questions, then there's like 30 chapters, so you're answering the same questions, and some of the chapters are short. And you're like, oh. And they didn't like it. They're good sports. They played along, but they didn't like having to answer questions. And it was the same questions just about every time. But what I love was, and as an author, I didn't know readers do this, and you tell me what you do. Every new character I brought in, that's immediately who they thought was the bad guy. Everybody, the mailman came to the door, that's the killer, every time. It was so funny. And I told them later, because those same people are on my readers club, like a newsletter thing I send out. So I emailed them as a group. I was like, you guys made me laugh so hard. Didn't matter who came in the book, that you all thought that was the killer, which is awesome. So my next book, I purposely pointed everybody's attention at this one character who was definitely not the killer, and then I made the character a despicable person. So everybody wanted it to be the killer. It was kind of pointed that way, and it turned out net total smoke screen. So that was kind of fun. But they didn't like having to take a quiz at the end of every chapter. But that was something I didn't know. That are you that way when there's a new? Because you got to figure the killer is going to be introduced somewhere in this book. So one of these people is going to be the killer, right?
Right. Like I usually don't tend to go towards like the smaller characters or like the side characters. Sometimes it is them. And I don't usually like form an opinion until I'm about like halfway through a book, usually.
Really? Wow.
But I think like some books are very formulaic that it's like, I don't know, more obvious that who is going to be the killer. And it's just the way it's written. And I think sometimes you need those books where it's very predictable. And it's like, you just need a predictable book and it's okay to listen to that. But
are you usually pretty good at figuring out who the villain is, and or in a mystery?
Well, like you said, like I thought I was, but now maybe I don't know. But
there are some people who just they're good at it. And
right.
I had an author friend who we critique partner each other's books, and it didn't matter what kind of stuff I tried to do. She was like, I think this is the killer right here. And I was like, you're right. How the heck do you know that early in the story? She was like, just something. So I know who the killer is. So I have to be careful when I write that I got to get them enough information to let you, by the time you get to the end, it's like, okay, the clues were there, I see it, versus you have no idea, and then bang, it happens. Like, what? We had no way to figure it out. Like the reader kind of wants to be figuring it out with the detectives kind of thing. But she was very good at it. And she said she drove her husband nuts because as soon as they start watching a movie, like 10 minutes into it, she's like, that's the killer. And there was one, again, I was listening to this comedian's podcast. He said his daughter is the same way. They were watching the movie The Usual Suspects. You ever see that movie? All right, so it's Kaiser Soze and Kevin Spacey is spinning this. He gets brought in and he's spinning this yarn about the bad guy. So the right in the beginning somewhere, I guess the killer holds up a gun and shoots somebody, and the killer's got a really unique watch, okay, which I didn't pick up on. This comedian's daughter, I guess, I don't know what, she's 16, 18, something like that. She's like, ooh, keep an eye on that watch. The very next scene is Kevin Spacey. She goes, he's the killer. He's got the same watch. Done. The whole big surprise movie, right? It's like Sixth Sense. It's like, oh, he never turns around. I wonder if he's dead the whole time. Some people, very few people got that. But
I did not.
Yeah, no. And then Sixth Sense, I liked it because once you know it, then it's fun to go back and look at it again. Like, oh, he never turns around. He's always wearing the same clothes. He's always, and I think the director said something like that they made everybody on the crew or whatever go through it. Did we miss anything? Is there any place where we screwed it up? It's pretty smart. Very, very, and I like to do, I've never done something like that, but I like to do the twists and the surprises. But I also like to do where now I have told you a few times, now that you know who the killer is, now I like to have kind of a cat and mouse, because the detectives don't usually yet know who the killer is. I let the reader know. But which do you prefer? Do you like finding out at the end, like an Agatha Christie thing? Here's the big reveal, and then the book's over, or do you like it where maybe halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, your suspicions are confirmed? It is this character, and now the detectives don't know that's the killer, and they're interacting, and the cat and mouse thing, and then they eventually. Which do you prefer?
I prefer the cat and mouse thing. I think.
Me too. Me too. I think the big reveal is easier maybe to do, but for me the drama comes in. But you got to do both. You got to have the mystery and then the reveal, and now here's the fun of where we can chase him down and catch him, or her or whatever. So most of my books are kind of done that way. So which way do you lean when you, or do you not know, I guess, when you start out, which way the book's gonna go?
Yeah, I usually don't know how it's going to go when I first start a book. So
So you mentioned Karen Slaughter. Is she one of your favorite authors?
I enjoy her. I haven't read any of her books in like years.
Really?
So yeah, I don't really know why I went away from her. It just happened. But yeah, I enjoy her book. Her
Yeah,
books.
I think I've got two of hers that I bought to read over the summer on vacation. For whatever reason, I didn't get to either one of them, but they're both highly recommended by friends who know the kind of stuff I like. And whenever I go on Amazon as an author, I go on Amazon, look at one of my books, and it'll say, if you enjoyed that book, so my book, you'll enjoy these other authors, and they'll give you a few. There's like 3 or 4 people who are always, if you like that, you'll like this types. So I've only flipped through a couple of her pages here and there. Like I said, I got a couple. I tend to just buy the book, hardcover, paperback, and get it here. And then when I'm ready to go or need a break or whatever, then
Yeah,
if I'm tired of writing for the week, I might spend Friday night through Sunday night just plowing through somebody else's book. But usually when I'm on a break, not when I'm in the middle of a story, because I'm always afraid I'm gonna take some of their ideas and put it in my
yep,
book. And
yeah.
so you said you read a couple of books at a time. Like how many do you, and these would be audiobooks, so you're jumping in and out of different
Maybe like 2 or 3. And when I do that, I try to pick different genres. So it's not like I might be listening to a nonfiction, a horror, and a like mystery. So they won't really overlap usually.
and then different narrators probably helps
Yeah.
keep it clear. See, I know authors who write more than one book at a time. I don't know a lot of authors that do that, but I know some that do. And I'm like, I think I would inadvertently screw that up too and drag this character, not the character, but maybe their mannerisms. Or one was kind of a snarky, then all of a sudden, this person who wasn't a snarky character in chapter 10 is a snarky character all of a sudden. It's like, oh, shoot, I was, mixing my characters up. But is it like doing that many different audiobooks? Is it like how you might flip channels on TV and kind of you just when do you decide to stop from one and switch over to the other?
I think like when I'm getting like to like the last like I might go back and forth like every like couple of chapters, but once I get to like the 75% point, I'll like finish one book before I go back to the other ones. And there's sometimes where like one of the audiobooks will like really catch me and I'll just listen to that for the rest of the day and not go back to the ones until the next day. So it just really depends.
Well, you obviously enjoy doing it. Would you say that's typically what you do over the course of a month? You're always within 2 or 3 books, juggling 2 or 3 books kind of thing that you listen to at the same time?
Most months, yeah. This month, no. I mean, most months I do that, yeah.
Is there anybody whose stuff when you put on one of their books, you go straight through?
Tiffany D. Jackson, I really like her book.
Yeah. So is that, again, audiobook? So is that the way she writes or is it the narration?
I think it's both. Yep. Yeah, for sure.
So that's good. So it's like you're an automatic with her. You get every new thing she comes out with.
I do now. Like before her, like I was never like an auto buy person.
Yeah, me either.
At all. And I was just introduced to her last year. I started reading her books. And so like a lot of my books are audio, so I don't necessarily buy it because on Script it's a subscription, so you get as many books as you want to read during that month. But yeah, like the last book she wrote, I like pre-ordered it. So yeah, she's as close to an auto buy author I think that I'll ever have.
What about the ones that you start and put aside? Obviously, there are some that you would go back to. What would you say are you don't need to name titles, but what is it about are there ones that you just don't go back to ever? And what would you say is something about those that causes you to not go back to them? Like you start, stop, and don't DNF, right? Don't finish it.
It just depends on the book. Like there's some books where I just don't like the characters. They do things that kind of just get on my nerves, and I'm like, if I knew this person in real life, I would not want to be around them. and they're supposed to be the protagonist of the book, like the hero of the book, and I just don't like their choices. So there's some of those books. Sometimes it's just not the right time, and like in a couple of years I might go back to it, but yeah, but for now it's just not the right time in my life for me to be reading that book.
Yeah, it's funny. You're as an author, you're supposed to have characters in there the readers don't like, but they're not. That shouldn't be the main character,
Yeah,
Just like the villain, or like they
yeah.
say, you love to hate certain characters. That's the old soap
And
opera.
there are some books where like it's very obvious you're supposed to like not like the character, and as long as it's written well, then I like those books. Like there's a book, Cherish Farah, where the narrator is very unreliable and she's very unlikable, but I really like that book. So it just depends on the book. And I think some books it's very obvious that if that's the way you're supposed to feel towards the main character, and there's other books where you're supposed to like the main character and you just don't. So
Sometimes you just don't connect, or sometimes it's the character has done or is doing something that you object to, right? Like maybe my personal thing is when I was doing it was a period where I was online on an online critique group, and so I read everything. I read romance, horror, murder mysteries. But they asked you, what your favorite genres, which ones would you want to stay away from? And I'm like, I wouldn't stay away from a genre, but I wouldn't be a big reader of erotica. Just felt cheap to me and I wouldn't do it. Well, there's one time this USA Today bestselling author, maybe a New York Times bestselling author, was in that group. And I'm like, wow. And she wrote erotica. And I was like, you know what? There's probably things I can learn from her. I'll volunteer to be a critique partner with her. That was a great book. And I have it up on my shelf there. It was a great book. It was called Dark Notes. But why it was great was kind of like why most stories are. First of all, I expected it to be really poorly written. It wasn't. But there was a lot of suspense, and it was about this poor girl who was a really like a virtuoso musician, pianist, and a teacher. And he had gotten it, not a teacher, I think she's college age or high school,
Right.
somewhere around there, right? Where it's kind of like, you shouldn't, right? So he had gotten in trouble with having an affair with one of the students. That's why he's at this new school. But it was a lot of suspense, he had a lot of things going on. She had a lot going on in her life, and it was a very well written, very dramatic, a lot of real life stuff in there, and you just felt a lot of empathy for her because she was like living in a trailer. Her brother was like an alcoholic. Her mom would show up every once in a while, and there's like holes in the floor, and she was kind of on her own, even though she had a place to live. She was kind of on her own, kind of being scrappy. And then here's this guy who's like got it all, but he's got his demons and he can't afford to screw up again. And they kind of fall for each other. But now it's erotica, right? So there was a lot of the sex in there. And even that was well done. It wasn't really anything, there's just crude versions of it. And this was really nice. So I learned a lot. That's a book I never would have picked up, would have said unequivocally, not for me. But something that's well written, a good pace, and a good storyline. There are times where you can bring in sex and as graphic as you want to get, and it works. I mean, there's times where it's cheap, but where do you go as far as what kind of R rating, G rating, PG? What do you prefer in your books that you read? Or doesn't it matter?
No, like you were talking about romance. So with romance,
No, it could be anything. There can be sex.
Yeah, but I want to talk about that. I prefer like the more darker romance. And before I was on Book Talk, I never like really read romance at all. And I was kind of staying away from the true crime stuff and the thriller stuff because of something that happened in like my personal life. So I was kind of trying to keep away from that. And so I think like the darker romance kind of got me out of the huge reading slump that I was in. I hadn't like really read any books at that point for months, because what I usually gravitated towards wasn't working for me at that point in my life. And I think like with all of my books, really, like I prefer things that are a little darker, but I always need like the palette cleansers, and I need like cozy fantasy every once in a while just to kind of
So if
pull
you
me
read a
out of
dark
the rut.
romance, the next book's got to be like a
Yeah,
cozy,
or if I'm
lighthearted comedy.
exactly. So, and I still don't really go towards the like more lighthearted, I don't know, romance, but like even like I need a comedy book every once in a while, or yeah, just to kind of get away from what I've been reading.
You know, cozies are fun. I had a friend who wrote cozies, and she's like, they're shorter. Like, say, one of my books is 85,000 words. Her cozies would be like 65,000, so shorter and much more lighthearted. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like Murder She Wrote stuff. I don't know if I could do that. She was like, well, she sees some of my characters are funny. She's like, you do it, you just do it with secondary characters, and you just switch that up and they become the main character and their little screwed up world kind of deal. But I thought, you know what, I'm not gonna venture down that road, but I do enjoy a cozy every once in a while, or a lighthearted, what they call a dark comedy, where it's like people are getting killed, but the whole movie is basically a funny movie, and it's fun to create those situations and watch them, but I don't know if that's something I would do all the time. What in your mind is a dark romance? What makes it a dark romance?
I think like elements of the book are things that in real life we wouldn't. It's not acceptable in real life. Like like it's not acceptable for a person to like stalk somebody and then they fall in love with each other. That's not something that in real life you're going to be like, well, that's appropriate, that's acceptable. So just things like in that nature, I guess. And I don't like read them all the time, but yeah.
No, but that kind of takes us back to those true crime podcasts and what is it, the curiously morbid stuff, where it's like there's definitely dark elements, and it's something about, well, I tell you what my theory on it is, and I didn't come up with this. It's like willingly exposing yourself to things you're afraid of doesn't make you less afraid. It just makes you braver to confront things, right? And so it's kind of like the roller coaster. I hate going down that big hill. Pretty much everything else on the roller coaster I'm cool with. Maybe the occasional sharp turn that snaps my neck, I don't dig so much. But the big drop at the very beginning, hate that. Hate it, hate that feeling. Makes me nauseous the rest of the day sometimes. And what I hate, probably second to that, is going up clink, 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 the slow, here we go, this is coming thing, right? So, there's that. So I think I had heard somebody say that this is why those types of things are popular, is because it's almost like why you enjoy a scary movie. You want to be scared, but you want to also know you're going to be okay at the end. Like,
right.
I'll watch those people get killed. I'm over here safe. I can turn it off. I can, turn off the podcast, whatever. Like, there's that aspect to it of going to where the scary stuff is, checking it out. But I'm happy, safe right here on my sofa, whatever it is,
Yeah.
So, what would you say is why you're so popular on TikTok? Well, first of all, do you think you are? I think you are.
I don't, but I don't know. I think
You're not getting recognized on the street. Hey, TikTok.
Yeah, no, thankfully. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just like a genuine person, and like I go into my friends, videos, and I like try to make comments or at least like their videos, and I think it's all about community. And so it's like you get what you give, right? So yeah, but I don't think I'm that popular, but thank you for thinking so.
Well, you're pretty popular, and how these things, again, in my limited experience, how these things tend to work is, I used to be in sales way back when, and there was a guy who told me, he goes, it's much harder to go from zero to $1,000 a month in sales than it is to go from $1,000 a month in sales to $10,000 a month in sales. I'm like, no, going from 1 to 10 is much harder than going 0 to 1. He goes, when you're starting at 0, you have nothing to build on, nobody to get recommendations from, there's no momentum. When you have that 1,000 a month, you know now what works and how to begin to build. It starts to click. And even if all it is you're doing the same thing, you've got more content out there to where people are more able to find that same thing. And again, the integrity comes through and the you being you stuff. And I'll say there's like a vulnerable aspect of you're being honest. You're saying, I like this. People could slam all over you. How could you like that? It's the most horrible thing in the world, or vice versa, which you tend not to do, which would be to say, I didn't like this, and everybody jump all over you. Yeah, it's the best book in the world, and all the fans from that side come out. Again, it's more of a respect thing, I think, where it's like, I'm not going to come on here and crap all over somebody's book, but certainly there are books you didn't like, you don't voice them. But I think people come because, and why you have so many followers that you do is because it's like producing a quality product. They know what they're going to get, and you're pretty upbeat and energetic, and you've got your little your certain way of doing things that works for you. It's probably your personality, so you're letting your personality come through onto the videos you do. I think it's a combination of all that stuff, and so you're already at like 10,000. So
Right.
Do you still get notices? I don't know, because I'm not at that level. Do you still get notices of this many people followed you today, or visit individually, like Jim followed you, Jan followed you, anything like that?
I do, but unfortunately, it's like at a point where, like before, like whenever I would get like these certain people followed you, and I still get them, but I don't always notice them. So I'll have people who've been following me for a while, and I try to follow everybody. I look at their profiles and I see if they're like book related or true crime related, and then I'll usually follow them back if we kind of align with taste. But there's some people that have been following me for months, and I'll have no idea because I just didn't catch it.
Yeah. I miss that with
so
comments sometimes too. And I don't get anywhere near as many comments as you. I don't know, I try to look at it every day and see who comments, to be polite, see what they said. Thank you for commenting, or just acknowledge it some way. And there were some in there that were from months ago. I was like, how did I miss this? And it was somebody I like, somebody I talked to a lot. So I think there's just a volume. And again, I don't have anywhere near the volume you have. So what you did a video recently that I particularly struck a chord with me, where you were talking about the little packets of peanut M&Ms. Was this a Halloween treat you went out and got?
No, we get like the big boxes from Costco. So they were
all
full
the time
size.
you get those?
No, my husband like gets them during October. But it's for us. We don't hand them out. But they're like it was like the full size thing of peanut M&Ms. It wasn't like a fun pack.
See, that's what I thought it was, because
No, it was like a full size. It had 5 in it, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Full size. Now, see, a fun pack. So, in other words, the kind I would buy is a little bag or whatever it is with like 20 bags of M&Ms that you're going to give out to trick or treaters. So, if there's only 5 in there, I'm like, fine. They're going to have 20 pounds of candy. Do they really need 100 M&Ms that night? But so it was just a regular size.
It was a regular size,
peanut
M&M. It had 5. Yeah.
So, do you have, again, now when you're doing your audiobook listening, do you have a favorite snack? I've seen where people have to have candles and a certain lighting, and their bowl of popcorn or whatever their snack is. Do you go at it that way?
I don't have like a favorite like reading snack, but I really enjoy like popcorn with M&Ms in it, but I don't need to have that.
Popcorn with M&Ms in it?
Yeah, just like hot popcorn, and you put the M&Ms in it, and it kind of all gets kind of melty. And
don't the M&Ms sink to the bottom of the popcorn?
You kind of have to like move it around. But
I've never tried that. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't know that anybody I know has ever tried that. Well, is that like
it's really good.
Fairly common? You should maybe do a video on that. That could put you over get you 1 million subscribers. So you just make fresh popcorn, like Orville Redenbacher, pack it in the microwave, dump it in a bowl, then dump in regular M&Ms or peanut M&Ms?
Regular, yeah.
Regular ones in that. How many?
Yep,
what size of a bag? Just a regular size, full size?
It depends. Like I'll get that if I'm going to like the movies. So like if I have like a medium-sized bucket, I'll just take one of the movie M&Ms and just put the box in there. Yeah. But at home we also have my family likes M&Ms, so we have like this big jug of it. So I just kind of like take a handful and just throw it in.
That blows my mind. Where did you come up with this particular recipe?
I don't know. I don't know.
Is it you just always have done that, or was it when you had kids and you discovered it somewhere along the way?
Like I can't. I must have always done it because I can't remember a point where I didn't do it.
So we're talking Jen is a 10-year-old kid back in the day doing popcorn M&Ms.
Yeah, it's just always.
So now you've got to know. Okay, so again, I used to be a sales manager way back when, and I would do field rides with my sales rep. So we go to Wendy's, me and this one sales rep, and she orders our food. We sit down, and we're going to go on another appointment. She goes, "Do you mind if I do something gross?" I'm like, I shouldn't say yes to that, but it's Wendy's. How gross can it be? Go for it. So she takes one of her French fries and she dips it in her Frosty, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's all that unusual, because when I would mention it to people, I don't think I ever mentioned it to somebody who did it, but I mentioned it and everybody was like, I know somebody, my cousin does that or whatever. It's like, so it wasn't that unusual. So when you go back, I'm trying to think, do I do anything weird, quirky like that? I'll see if I can think of something. But when you go back, your cousins come over to the house, and would they do the popcorn M&M mix? Like, now your kids, obviously they grew up with it. So that's just what you guys do. Do their friends come over and say, "Ooh, you're going to put popcorn with M&Ms?" That, you know?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's ever said anything to me about it, but I don't know. Maybe they think it's weird. I don't know.
Maybe it's more. So listen, M&Ms are different colors. So do the colors change the popcorn color a little bit too?
No.
So they just soften up. See, I don't really like melted chocolate unless it's like hot fudge sundae.
Yeah, and it doesn't it gets like softer, but it's not to the point where it's like a melted mess on your hands or anything like that.
No, the popcorn will do that part, right? You're gonna get your butter or whatever. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we'll find out probably when this thing airs. Or you should do a TikTok on it. Just ask people, have you ever heard of this? Is this something you do in your family or not? To be honest, I can't. Could I think of something weird that I do? It wouldn't be weird to me if I do it, but I'll try to think if I have any kind of a weird snack. I'm sure I have weird quirks. Like I talk about writing quirks. I don't think I have too many, but one for sure is I have to cut my fingernails really short before I start writing. Like if I'm going to be mowing the lawn this weekend and I know I'm not going to get any writing done, no big deal. If I'm checking emails and stuff or editing, not a big deal. But right now, I'm in the middle of trying to, write a novel, and so for whatever reason, my nails need to be short. And the reason why actually is I use kind of an old school keyboard, so it doesn't have the soft foamy keys on it. I don't really like that. I like the feel of the keyboard. And then if my nails and they're not long, but they're long for me, they'll hit the key, and it's irritating for your fingernail to hit the key like you want the tip of your finger to hit it. So I have to keep my fingernails really short if I'm doing serious writing at that moment. I don't think, I mean, I have my, not a skull mug, but in there is my tea. So I've always got my Crystal Light peach mango green tea, just because that's what I drink. So, I'm not going to get up and walk to the kitchen every time I want to have a sip of tea. But so I have that. Other than that, I'm not sure I don't think I have too many writing quirks, but I know people who do. Like, same with like those reading quirks. They've got to have candles and a scented thing and the certain songs. And I don't do any of that. I don't listen to music. I usually write in complete silence just because I'm focusing on what I'm doing. I wouldn't be paying attention to it anyway, Right. That's me. So you don't have a snack you recommend for reading, or is the peanut M&Ms and the popcorn, is that the recommended snack?
That's my preferred snack. I don't have anything like I have like my usually like a cup of tea or like my bottle of water. But yeah, there's nothing that I have to have it every single time.
Well, the only reason I have the tea every time is because I drink tea. So that's drink. I've always got a cup of this sitting around. Maybe a quirk is I like it at room temperature. It's not iced tea. There's no ice in it. It's not hot tea. My wife drinks hot tea all day. I live in Florida, but I think it just tastes better. That particular brand of tea tastes better when it's at room temperature to me for whatever reason. So that's a quirk. He drinks room temperature tea all day. So what would you say is your favorite social media? Is it TikTok or is it something else?
It's TikTok, yeah. And I still have like Facebook and Instagram, but I don't go on there very much. And I just have my Facebook mainly to kind of keep in contact with my family because I'm in Iowa and they're all in California. So it's just kind of a way to be like, oh, these are some pictures you can look at now. But yeah, it's mainly TikTok.
Did you used to be real active on Facebook?
Yeah, like years ago. But
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
I kind of moved away from it. I didn't really segue from Facebook to TikTok. Like you, my daughter introduced me to TikTok. Her thing was, Dad, you need to have an account so you can like my videos. I'm like, okay. And she would open my phone and she would like her video. I didn't know what was going on. And then my wife was like, you should do some stuff there. It'll help you market books. And I always think it's fun when you see an author, maybe you see an interview, you have a certain idea of what they're like. So I always thought my TikTok would be a little more behind the scenes, what I'm like, and then also like maybe some common questions readers will want to know, like where do you get your ideas? So I had a little series where I was like, here's where I got an idea, or not where I did, but you look at this field and you think, oh, what a pretty pasture. And the author looks at it and says, that's where the victims are buried, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I did a series of those. But for the most part, like I said, I enjoy a little glimpse behind the scenes, or, we did a charity event. So it was like kids with cancer, and they had a fashion show. So they got to walk down the catwalk all dressed up and accompanied by a model, like a fashion model. And then they got to walk the catwalk a second time with whatever they wanted to be as a career. Someone who is a firefighter or Spider-Man. Well, I was an author, so one girl wanted to be an author, so I got to walk on the catwalk with her. So to me, that would be like, that's kind of a cool TikTok maybe to do and explain why I was doing it.
Yeah.
Kind of yes, kind of no, kind of deal. What do you when you have, like, say, your favorite authors? Well, first of all, tell me who are some of your favorite authors, maybe your top 5 or so.
Like Tiffany D. Jackson. I like Sarah Gailey. I like Ruth Ware. That's probably my top 3.
And then do you enjoy learning more about them? Or you pretty much, I'm happy just create the stories. I'm not interested in the back, behind the curtain kind of stuff.
I like to see more about them just as writers, about their like personal lives. I think it makes you feel closer to the author.
I think so too, but there's a fine line. It's like,
oh yeah,
if I was gonna talk about the things that are going on in my life, it would almost always be something to do with my 12-year-old daughter, something she's dealing with. So now it's like, she's not asking to be put in the limelight, so I can't do that, right?
Right.
And
yeah.
you said you got kids. What are the ages of, or maybe how old is your oldest?
My oldest is 12 and my youngest is 10.
Yeah, so there's like a price, like it's cool. You can say whatever you want about a baby, but once that baby starts going to kindergarten and first grade, I found it's like, I gotta, and then honestly, that's probably when I started scaling back on Facebook, because people, when you have a baby, everyone wants to share in that joy. And then as you're discovering neat things the kids do, either people are finding it amusing or they've been there, done that. Like, oh, I remember when my kids were young and doing that stuff. And so there's a lot of that. And I think it was probably when she got first grade, second grade, I thought, all right, her life is hers. I probably shouldn't be talking about, oh, she did this today, like something that is potentially embarrassing to her. Although her friends are certainly not on TikTok or Facebook, but at some point that information's out there. And I just thought it's probably not something I need to be going into. So then it'll be other things like, where do you get your ideas from? Or like, I don't think anybody, we were at a Halloween party last night. Again, my daughter and her friend, and my wife and I, and a bunch of people over there. And when we were coming home, we left a little bit early because we had 2 12-year-olds with us, my daughter and her friend. We're driving home, and her friend goes, now this party was full of food. We drank and ate the whole time. As we're the kids especially, right? Nonstop, potato chips, crumb cake, whatever. Everything was really cool. Everything was like Halloween
Mhm.
looking. So there were chocolate covered pretzels that look like spiders, made into spider shapes, and cheese that instead of like chunks of cheese were like cut like gravestones. It was really cool. This lady really goes all out. The whole house is decorated. We're driving home, so we've been eating the whole time. We're driving home, and the kid goes, "I could really go for a chili dog from Sonic right now." I'm like, you did nothing but eat for the last 3 hours, and you want to chill. And all of a sudden, I'm like, "Dang, chili dog that does sound pretty good." I'm not hungry, but now all day today, I'm like, I want to have chili dogs for lunch. I kind of got that chili dog vibe going on. I can't really have
Right.
chili dogs for dinner. I'm the only one who will eat them. So it's like I gotta kind of make an excuse. I haven't figured out, am I gonna go to Sonic and get one? Probably wouldn't be as good as if I just make it here, but I don't know. Nobody else is gonna eat them. It's just gonna be me. So kind of she planted that seed in my head, dang it. And now I'm like all craving a chili dog. Not I definitely don't need to be eating chili dogs. That's just not something I need to be doing right now. So what else we got going on? What's coming down the pipeline for you? Just going to keep on keeping on? Do you have some book that you're excited about that's coming out, or?
Um, Not really. I just gonna keep on keeping on, like you said, and get ready for the holidays, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, do you do anything fancy for Halloween?
We just go trick or treating. Our neighborhood is like a very like close knit community, and so we do a lot of my neighbors do a lot of fun things for the kids. Like we have like bonfires and
Do you
stuff like
decorate?
that. We do, yes. Our house is decorated. My husband is very into Halloween and to everything horror.
Really?
So yes, our house is decorated.
Well, that's cool. I have a friend who I think they start decorating in August, and they're kind of the Addams family. They like all that dark stuff. They have pet rats, not a dog. Well, they have dogs, but they have a pet rat or several, I think. And the house has always kind of got a dark theme to it, and they really get fired up at Halloween time. Now our house sits back. It's like 1 acre properties here from my street.
Okay.
No sidewalks, not a lot of streetlights, so it's spooky looking, but kids don't want to trick or treat on this street because it's too spooky.
Right.
And our house sits back, got a gravel driveway, a bunch of oak trees. So when you try to Spanish moss and stuff, when you try to light that up, it just looks like a haunted house, like the kind you don't want to go to, like bad things have happened in that house. So usually I get some decorations out and decorate. We're probably really not, because on the actual night of trick or treat, we end up having to turn all our lights off so that people won't come here because we're in some other neighborhood trick or treating.
Yeah.
So you don't want them to come all the way down here and there's nothing here, and all of a sudden they're like, well, let's egg this house or whatever. So we kind of got to avoid that. But yeah, I think that I grew up in the neighborhood that's like what you're describing, where everybody decorated and everybody trick or treated, and you get like a pillowcase full of candy before you got 2 blocks, and
Mm-hmm.
those were good times.
Yeah.
Do you do anything special for Thanksgiving or Christmas?
They usually go to my in-laws' house. This year my birthday's on Thanksgiving, so I'll celebrate my birthday too. So,
Oh,
but
well,
nothing like really special.
that happens occasionally, not too often, right? Because Thanksgiving moves around a little bit.
Yep, it's about every 7 years it'll fall on Thanksgiving.
Oh,
So
that's kind of cool.
yeah.
Well, do you have a goal for how many followers you want to get to on TikTok, or you just enjoy
No, I've met it. I wanted to get to 10K so I can, make my playlist, and I've made it to 10K. So if I make more than that, great. But if I stay where I am, that's fine with me too.
I think it's going to be like a snowball rolling down a hill. There may not be the same kind of acceleration, but again, like the guy said, it's probably easier to go from 10 to 20 than it is to go from 0 to 10. And so how long did it take? A couple years to get to 10, but let's say between going from 5 to 10, how long did that take?
I don't know, a couple months, I would say.
That's fast.
Yeah.
I was going to say
Yeah.
you'll probably be at 20,000 maybe in 6 months, probably, I would think.
I don't know, maybe.
All right. Well, so you kind of do a book wrap up kind of thing, right? Occasionally on TikTok. So did you have something, let's say we're most of the way through October. So do you have a book this month that's really just head and shoulders above the rest that you you want to do a shout out for?
Well, when I did my reading wrap up, I just had to make a video with every single book I've read for the month. And so this month I'm on my third book now, but like one of the books I read was like it was a book, so it was really short.
Well, let's go the other way. Let's say September. You read more books then. What
Okay,
was the best book you read in September?
That was The Weight of Blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best. Yeah, that's the best book of the month.
Well, that was one of the ones you gave 5 stars to, and so that was
Mhm.
that was the top for last month.
Yeah, for sure.
That's good. Well, and it fits timely, right? So give a shout out to that horror theme. So are you going to do any kind of, have you thought about giving a consideration to best book I read this year, like a year-end wrap-up deal?
I've never thought of it. Maybe I can do like a top like 10. I think last year I did like a video that had like my top book from each month. So maybe I'll do something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like, what was the best book you liked each month? Understanding that, let's say you read all B-level books in October and all A-level books in September. Some of the September books might have been better than the October books, but
Right.
and then you could say, okay, here was my top 10 or my top book each month. And then out of the year, this is the overall winner for the year kind of thing.
Yeah.
You should do that. Maybe we'll have you back and you can do your countdown like Casey Kasem.
Oh,
Here's what we
yeah.
had in October.
Maybe.
All right. Well, listen, did you have any questions for me?
I think that I was going to ask you like when you're writing, like how do you come up with your ideas for your books? Because I don't think I'm creative at all when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think people who write are just fascinating because they have so many good ideas in their
See,
head.
I'm going to disagree with you. That popcorn M&M thing, that's pretty creative. I've never heard that. I've been around a little while. I've never heard that one. And seeing something like that, it's like that would be a fun thing to have a character, a story do. Now I'm not going to steal yours, but it's like it's unusual enough for me, right? But now I'm inclined to think maybe it's just something I don't know about. Like, maybe in some places you get corn on the cob and you put butter on it, and everybody says, yeah, of course you do that. And I'm like the one dork who didn't know the whole world does that, right? So there's always that possibility. But I'm leaning the other way and saying this is a unique little snack thing you've got going. So that might be fun to have some character do. So I look at things like that when I'm in the grocery store. So I'm at the worst at come up with character names because you kind of want them to be unique, but you don't want them to be odd. They need to be a little unique, but still common. Like it would make sense. Believability, like you were saying earlier, this could happen. You're not going to run into some guy named, Zotro. You're probably not.
Right.
But if you did, okay, probably the main character is not going to be named that. So I'm in the grocery store the other day, and the lady who rang me up, her name was Calliope. I know, that's an interesting name. And she's there a lot. She's rung me up a number of times. And I thought, so Calliope's an interesting name, but I don't want a main character named that. So I made my first victim in this book I'm working on. Her name was Calliope. And I think I made her Calliope Hernandez because the lady seemed like a Spanish kind of lady. And so I'm in Tampa, so we got a lot of Hernandez and Martinez around here. And so I thought, okay, well, if I worked with her, I probably wouldn't use so many syllables to refer to her, Calliope. I would probably call her Callie or maybe Cal, right? I thought Cal sounds more like a guy. Callie sounds like a lady, right? So then I named her Callie Hernandez, I think, or Callie Martinez, whatever it was, Hernandez, I think. So I pick up that, right? So I'm always looking for names that are unique but not too far gone. And then as far as situations, if you're writing a murder mystery, you're going to have somebody gets killed. The detectives have to figure out who did it, and then maybe that's the ending when they figure out who did it, or maybe they figure out 2/3 of the way through, and then you have the cat and mouse, which is what I like to do, and then you lock them up. So in one of my books, I had it all set up to where, boom, the big finale kind of thing, and I was talking with a critique partner, and just the whim came to me. I always try to think of a way to twist it. So in one of my stories I was saying, I really made everybody hate this, was a sheriff. I really made everybody hate this one character. So everybody thought he was definitely a bad guy. He was a bad person, but he wasn't the villain in this story. And so everybody wanted it to be him, right? And I thought, well, how do I twist things up? So with this other story, it's like, okay, they got the bad guy, the villain. And I thought, well, what if the villain got away? What if they did a 1-2 kind of switcheroo deal and got away, and the cops don't realize that or whatever? In that story, the house burns down and they find a body, and they it all checks out that it's the person. But she had actually killed somebody before and brought the body there and set the fire with the intention of, you'll find that body, you'll check the records, that's going to check out with me. I've got a fake ID, I'm out of here. So she did like a double fake ID thing. And I thought, ooh, nobody's going to see that coming. And that character had been so smart. Everything she did was so smart. She smashed out her taillight and then took her boss to lunch and called the cops on herself to get pulled over for the broken taillight, just so she could blame it on somebody in the office who doesn't like her, right? I mean, she was just that level. Well, who's like that, you know? So those types of things, trying to think of a twist to keep the readers guessing. And usually it's something basic that you just wouldn't expect, like some sweet little old lady next door and she's killing people, or you know, you paint it a little bit to where it's like, I never would have suspected that. But a lot of times with me, it's like, okay, so now we've got all this, what's another twist I can do? And that's actually what I'm working on. I try to outline my book. So the murder happens, here's some interaction, how the detectives find out about it. Here's some little conflict. This particular detective isn't getting along with the boss. He was recently suspended, so he's going to have some fray with that guy. The other one's is up for promotion, so she's going to be stressed out about her interviews. And in the middle comes this killing spree that pulls her away from doing a good job of her interviews and trying to have a normal family life with her kids. She's going through a divorce, and he's over here doing this stuff. And they're best friends. They work together. They got to go through all that crap. And then I'm like, what's a good twist at the end? They're going to be like a hostage thing. She's working from the office, giving him information. He's in the field, and he's with he's like almost like a ride along. They brought a PR person to help the department's image, and he's like, stay here in the car or whatever, and she doesn't. So the bad guy gets her, and now he has to kind of surrender. So now the bad guy's got these two hostages, and we know how it ends. But I'm thinking, how can I twist it? How can I throw one more twist in there? And I think I've got it ironed out. So it's like I can write most of this story, and then if I can figure out that little twist, which I think I do, but now it's like I got to set it to where it's, you wouldn't have suspected the person. You got to suspect the right person. I got to give you a few red herrings, but I want one to be convincing to where it's like when it turns out it can't be that person you thought it was, then you're like, oh my God, it has to be this one. Yeah. And so then it's like, all right, so I can write like 90% of the story. Before I conclude it, I've got to figure out like Sixth Sense. Where do I go back and put things, and I got to double check and make sure I'm not saying the wrong thing. So the ideas just come from wherever, like fun stuff. You'll hear something on the news that's like, wow, that would be a good story, or just from everywhere. There was somebody who made the quote, somebody walks down the street and there's 100 story ideas. Most people don't see any. The author sees a dozen. Most people don't see any, kind of thing. It's kind of like that. It's like you train yourself to look for, ooh, that could be something good. And I kind of collect them. And then when it comes time to write the story, I'm like, this was not so good. That was not so good. This one could be really good. And I kind of work with them like that. And then it's, you try to put a good ride together, right? Get on the roller coaster and try to take people around for a good ride.
Cool.
And when it works,
when you're reading a book, like a thriller or like whatever you read, do you prefer like everything to be like the ending to be like everything's tied up in a nice little bow and it all like kind of flows together, or do you mind like a more ambiguous ending? Or
I actually, again, like you, if it's well written, I'm okay with it. It's like if you're looking at a painting, Picasso is different from Matisse, is different from Rembrandt. Do I appreciate that style? That one guy who did with all the dots, or the other guy who did all the splatters. The splatter guy, I don't care for. Salvador Dali, I like what he does. It makes me think, but I don't want it on my wall. But I love going to that museum and seeing all the bizarre things he thought of, right? So after a couple of chapters, you kind of get a feel for how that writer does things. And then if you're enjoying that ride, it's okay however they chose to do it. And there are movies that way, books that way. Typically, what I do is one of my critique partners very early on was like, the typical reader of this genre prefers, like what I did was the book Double Blind. It was one of my first murder mystery that I wrote. And I had the killer gets confronted, the cops confront, there's a scene, and one of the victims kills the killer. So the cop didn't do it. The cop kind of facilitated it, but he didn't realize this one victim, kills the killer. So I had it end where it was a big tragedy. The killer turned out to be the victim's daughter and was about to kill two other people, and the mom stepped in and shot her own daughter because the daughter had killed her husband, had killed her sister. It's kind of like it needed to happen, but it was still her daughter. And the detective is kind of like, this is a tragedy that never should have happened. It happened for all the wrong reasons, and this is the worst cap on that the mom had to kill her own daughter. He goes outside, it's raining. He goes outside to get away from it all. And he's just standing there in the rain waiting for the ambulance to arrive, and he hears the ambulance coming. That's where I ended it. And my critique partner says, it's a good ending, but readers of this genre kind of want to know that everybody was okay, who they like. So I'm like, she goes, you got to write like one more little sum up chapter. I'm like, I got to show them all riding off into the sunset, that it's all happily ever after. She goes, I think you'll be happier later if you do that, because it's no skin off your nose. It'll only take an afternoon to write it, but show that the people they care about are okay and that their world's going to go on. And they're like, okay. So the one guy got injured in the scuffle with the bad guy. So I created a little scene where he's in the hospital. The other characters come to visit him with their boss, like the lieutenant. Great job, blah, blah, blah. And then they kind of have a discussion where it's like, hey, our little detective agent, he's a police detective. These other characters like, hey, our little our little detective agency, private detective agency is going to be funded by the mom. She's a wealthy individual. She thinks we do good things. She can help us out. Okay, so those guys got their happy ending. And his partner is kind of hanging around and everybody else leaves. And she's like, so, what happens next kind of thing. He's like, well, bed rest and back to it. What are you doing? She goes, I'm going to go. My boys are hiking with their dad. I'm going to go visit with them. Now, she later on ends up divorcing him, right? I'm going to go spend some time with them and eating room service and looking out the window and not doing the hiking, but being in the hotel. When they're done hiking, I'll be there and we'll have dinner kind of thing. And so it was like they were friends. You would see they're joking around with each other. And he's like, okay, well, I guess I got his thing is he's kind of a skirt chaser. He's like, I got some waitresses I need to call. I'll catch up with you later. She's like, you're supposed to be on bed rest. And he goes, you do bed rest your way, I'll do bed rest mine. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, he hasn't changed at all during this thing. And it ends there. So you got to see your little groups of people have their happy ending. And in 2 weeks, he's going to be back on the job with her. Everything's going to be the way it was. And life's going to go on. This horrible tragedy was a blip, and they're going to keep doing what they do, fighting the good fight kind of thing. So I've ended all the books in that series that way, with that, what I call a little extra chapter at the end to show everybody's okay. I did the same thing with the Jet Thacker books. The series I didn't do that with, I wrote a medical thriller series where it kind of is that way and kind of not, where it's like, we solved this problem, but there are other problems and our job's not done yet kind of thing. Right. So some people do that like a cliffhanger. I'm not big on writing books that have a cliffhanger ending. It's like, I feel like you need to get your story. And if there's a cliffhanger, you kind of didn't get all the story. I'm not trying to bait you just to buy book 2, but I try to tie them up in a bow like that. Which way do you prefer?
I think it depends on the book and like how much you actually maybe care about the characters, I guess. There's one book I read recently where they had an epilogue where everything was tied up very nicely, and it made me like the book less. Like I didn't think it was like necessary at all, and it kind of made me irrationally angry that they actually included it, which makes no sense. But yeah, it just depends on. There's some books where like you want to know what happens because you really care about the characters, and there's other books where like, well, whatever, it is what it is. But yeah, that one That would
I'm
have made
not,
me mad that they included it. Like it was just, I don't know.
I'm not big on prologues or epilogues. Most prologues are really poorly written. It's like, here's all this stuff you need to know before the story starts. I'm like, readers are smart enough to kind of figure those things out. Like if
Yeah.
two partners have been partners for 5 years, they'll talk to each other like they've been friends for 5 years. And then they make a reference like, well, gosh, when we first met 5 years ago, I would never do it that bluntly, but like there's subtle ways to let, oh, they've been partners for a while. I always find, not always, but almost always, prologues are just unnecessary. I usually skip them, to be honest.
I do too. Yeah, I usually skip prologue.
Epilogues, like you say, depends on how they're done. In some stories, it's total. I don't care. Like take the Harry Potter stories. For one thing, I was pretty sure Harry didn't kill in the first book since there were a bunch of other books. And then in the last one, well, the movie, I guess I didn't read the last book. The movie, it shows he's putting his kid off to school. Like that's nice because if we enjoyed 8 books with these people, we kind of want to have that. But I don't know if we needed that at the end of every single book, right?
Yeah.
So kind of yes, kind of no. It's written more for kids, so maybe that's okay on that. So I like I said, my inclination is have the big finale, the big dramatic ending, end your book, but readers seem to like that little follow-up that they're okay. And I try to keep that thing extremely short. Like it's got to be well written, can't just be an info dump. But so if you are the type who doesn't like an epilogue, and again, technically it's not an epilogue, it's just a final chapter, but I want it to be super short because to me, the big symbol crash was when the climax happened with the killer, not 5 or 10 more minutes after that. So it's like I try to get that in real quick, get it over with, and then tell you, hey, come back for the next book where these two are going to go do some chase down some other bad guy kind of thing. Do most of the mystery thrillers and stuff you read have that, or do they mostly not have that?
I think they mostly end where I can just stop reading and it's like a nice tied together ending and all this kind of comes together, which is fine. I think the only books like where I want, like I need there to be a happy ending is my romance books, but other than that, I can.
Well, see, there's rules for that too. Romance is very big. They have almost to the point where, HEA, happily ever after, HEA. In the description, they'll say, as they're marketing the book, this HEA story, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's almost like you have to tell those readers, and nothing against romance readers, I wrote a romance, more than one. It's almost like you got to tell them this one has a happy ending because they're so mad if they wanted a happy ending and there's not one, they'll pillory you. Now, my most recent romance that came out, The Water Castle, doesn't have a happy ending. Originally it was going to, and I thought, look at the big romances, Romeo and Juliet, tragic ending. Dr. Zhivago, tragic ending. Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio, tragic ending. I thought, love story with Ryan O'Neal from the 70s, Molly McGraw, tragic ending, right? All based on, well, almost all based on books, tragic ending. So I thought, it's okay for a love story, a romance, and maybe it's even more powerful if the lovers can't be together at the end. And so that was how I did that one. But I wrote that one a while ago and it was sitting on the shelf and I'm like, you know what? I write murder mysteries now, but there's no point in leaving this thing on the shelf. Let's put it out there. Let's do its marketing for it. Give the full thing. And there are romantic subplots to a lot of my books. So it's not gonna be the worst thing in the world if a romance reader comes over and says, well, they're not strict romance, but there's romantic elements in them. So let me ask that on you. Do you find in your murder mysteries and other books, romance should have a romance plot, but do you prefer or not prefer romantic subplots in stories?
It doesn't matter to me. I don't really. When I go to mysteries and thrillers, I don't go to them for the romance. So if it's there, it's fine. If it's not, it's fine too.
Yeah, I try to do it like regular workplace stuff. Would this happen in real life? I don't try to have, here's these cop lovers who are going to go solve this mystery. It's like just people who work together for a long time and then she starts getting divorced. It might make sense that if he was her good friend, something could happen there. But that's over. It takes a couple of books for that stuff to happen, and it's not. They're more friends. They're just really good friends, and they work good together, and they like each other's company, and so it kind of happens. But it's definitely not the main impetus of the books or the series.
Right.
And then some of the ones, what's it? Dan Brown said, he goes, I watched his master class, and he goes, if you have a male main character and you introduce a female second character, you immediately have tension because a lot of people are going to wonder, are they going to get together? And he said that was why he made the French lady in the Da Vinci Code, made the main character, and the second character was the woman. He goes, it'll create more tension just for that reason. I was like, good point. I was thinking that. And one of the ladies who did a TikTok video was reading one of my books, and she's like, I'm wondering, is the detective in that was a woman hired by this man, the uncle of this missing person. And she's like, yeah, I want them to find the missing girl, but honestly, I'm wondering, are they going to get together? She was like a romance reader. So all I'm wondering is, are they going to get together? Forget the dead girl, or is she dead, or is she missing? I thought that was pretty funny. Well, why don't we wrap it up there? So if people want to know more about you, aside from finding you on TikTok, which is Jenn the Moody Reader, right?
Right. Yep. With
On
two
TikTok?
N's. Yep.
Oh,
Yep. And then Instagram is the same, Jenn the Moody Reader. So.
Do you do
unique
then, content for Instagram, or is it?
I usually lately I've been posting just my TikTok videos on there, but I do have some written like book reviews on there as well. But I'm not on them as much.
And you're on YouTube. Didn't you start a YouTube channel?
I did start a YouTube channel. That is in the very, very beginning stages. So there's not much on there right now, but that's Jenn the Moody Reader too. So.
Well, here's what we'll do. So what I do is I just cheat. Whatever I do on TikTok, I post everywhere else. So there's not that much unique content on the other stuff, but I figure it's easy enough. If you find me on Instagram and you like the video, it's got a watermark for TikTok. It's kind of like telling you, hey, click over there, there'll be more. Why don't we do this? You email me or message me your social media links. I'll post them in the show notes. Everybody can check them out there. But again, Jenn the Moody Reader on TikTok is where you're going to get your book reviews and more of this amazing, talented lady, her honest, from the heart renderings of books she's read and what she's up to, and maybe even the occasional oddball recipe like M&M's in popcorn. All right, well, listen, it was great getting to meet you. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, I'm glad you invited me. It was kind of out of my comfort zone to do this. So
I could tell that, and to be honest, avid readers tend not to want to do stuff like this. So it's hard to get them on, but I like doing it because I learn a lot. And I think people find it interesting, maybe to hear what the author has to say, but also obviously 10,000 more people like you on TikTok than like me. So obviously want to know your thoughts on different things, how you find books, all that. So that was good. I'd love to have you back again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm glad you decided to come down. We're going to end it there, folks. Thanks again for joining us on this episode, and we'll have another episode again for you real soon.